Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to A to Z Sports Live, talking about your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host, Tyler Fornes. Make sure before you're done here, like, subscribe, do all the things that help us grow and spread this kind of content to everybody, because that's the ultimate goal here is we want to provide the best Vikings content out there. And we're going to have conversations today about a few things. Some rumors coming from the combine, including at the quarterback position, and also some financial stuff. And we'll start with the financial stuff because it's both important and a little bit boring. One of the things that happened earlier today was the NFL informed teams what the salary cap will be. And we had already been given a range, and that range is between about 300 million and 305 million. Well, it was on the lower end at $301.2 million, which is a $22 million increase from last year. And that is a substantial increase, but there is one catch that's a little frustrating. And I'm sure the Players Association is going to be talking about it as well. Not only was it a total money drop from 23.8 million gained to 22 million flat, but it was also a significant percentage drop from 8.5% to 7.1%. That is something worth talking about because it's the whole point of the salary cap and the revenue split between the players and the owners is to make sure that the players end up getting their piece because they are ultimately the ones that are putting their lives and bodies on the line. Having that significant of a drop, like you wouldn't necessarily think about 1.4% would be a lot of money, but it is when we're talking about previous percentage gains being a lot closer to 10%. And how much of that just has to do with like the last couple years, you have these new television contracts, and we're going to get even newer television contracts here soon. That's going to impact the cap in like 2028, which is why teams are structuring contracts the way they are right now. It's a little frustrating for the players that they didn't get a little bit more, but now we know what that's going to be like for the Minnesota Vikings. They were projected to be about $43.2 million over the salary cap, per over the cap. They should be your number one go-to for anything salary cap related. They are strictly the best. But they had their projections based on the midpoint of the range that the NFL gave to try and be as accurate as possible. And usually the NFL kind of does a midpoint when they have those conversations and when they actually set the salary cap. This year they didn't do that. And because they didn't do that, now we're talking about adding $2.3 million to what over the cap had projected, meaning that the Minnesota Vikings are now $45.5 million over the salary cap. That's not life or death. We're not talking about the Vikings all of a sudden being in this dire situation. They've been in the same situation the entire time. And the one thing that stands out to me here is nothing changes. It's just the numbers are slightly worse than we were anticipating just due to how things are structured. And how do we kind of go about that? Easy. You're still going to restructure the contracts of guys like Justin Jefferson, Christian Darrisaw, maybe TJ Hawkinson, and Jonathan Grenard. And you're going to create enough cap space to make moves in free agency. Plus, we still don't know what's going to happen with Ryan Kelly. We don't know what's going to happen with Javon Hargrave, who that's one of the combine rumors we'll talk about here momentarily. They're still going to do the things that they have to do in order to get under the salary cap. This really doesn't change a whole lot. Because it doesn't change a whole lot, we'll kind of see how things continue to move forward. Personally, I'm pretty excited about the fact that we now understand what the salary cap is. So then we can actually start to make concrete moves. And this is what we have to do. This is how we're going to handle it. Now, is it an ideal situation to be 15% over the cap? No. But the way the contracts are structured and how they were handled by Kwesi Ofemensah and Rob Brzezinski was brilliant because Kwesi inherited a terrible salary cap situation with really bad contracts. Guys like Adam Thielen and Harrison Smith making significant amounts of money more than what their production was given because Rick Spielman signed them basically to what I call legacy contracts. They were being paid for what they did, not what they will do. And that is a mistake oftentimes when you have players towards the end of their careers. And they had to eat a ton of money with both players in different situations. And the Vikings are still going to have to eat around $10 million of Harrison Smith's contract whenever he does end up calling it quits, which could very well be this year. Hopefully he has one more year left in him, but we have seen some of that athleticism decline. So whatever he decides to do, I think the only thing that we can come to an agreement on with Harrison Smith is the fact that he will go in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Or if he doesn't, he absolutely should. Now, the contracts that you're going to want to restructure are going to be very simple. Who's going to stay here long-term? Justin Jefferson. has nearly a $40 million cap hit. Restructure that, you can save like $17 million. Christian Darrisaw has a massive cap hit. You restructure that, you can save plenty of money as well. TJ Hawkinson, if you think he's a core centerpiece of this team, you restructure him. Jonathan Grenard. You're essentially just taking a short-term interest-free loan. You're pushing the salary cap money that you have to take on the cap down the line. You don't want to do this with everybody, and you don't want to do this that often, but you're going to have to do it sometimes. And then there's also the idea, well, extend Brian O'Neill. You extend him, you could save like $17, $18 million in salary cap space while taking care of one of the better players on your roster. It's it's a really important element here that you're going to have to do at some point. And how the Vikings will handle it is going to be interesting. Rob Brzezinski is a salary cap guru, and he's going to have a plan to get things taken care of. Now let's kind of move to the combine rumors, because the financial stuff is done. Oh, one more note on the financials. Jordan Addison's fifth-year option is now set at $18 million. It was projected to be 17.2. Now it's a full $18 million. And that was released by the NFL about 10 minutes before we went live. So if you want to keep Jordan Addison, $18 million, which I'm going to be real, on the open market, he probably gets 25 to 30. I know the off-field stuff, and people will disagree, be like, oh, nobody's going to pay him that for off-field. NFL teams are, like, especially with what Addison has done, because none of it's like physical assault or battery, NFL teams are pretty lenient on that kind of stuff, and they'll be like, okay, we'll pay the guy. We've seen it time and time and time again. Let's talk about the combine rumors. First one being that Javon Hargrave is being mentioned in trade talks. Now, that can be taken a multitude of different ways. It can be that the Vikings are exploring trade offers, which is basically what was reported. It could be that teams are calling about Javon Hargrave, and we don't actually know how serious the conversations are. But we'll lay it out to you like this. Let's pull up Over the Cap and have a conversation about Javon Hargrave, because I think the conversation about where he is at from a salary cap perspective is a very important one. So, Javon Hargrave. Let's do this. Share the screen. There we go. So if you kind of take a look at the screen itself, so down here, 2026, he's due a base salary of $14.2 million, and the total cap hit is $21 million. All right. So if he's cut, you save $10.95 million, but you're still eating $10.497. Now, here's where things get interesting with a trade. Take a look at the same part of the screen. Trade pre-June 1st. It drops to $6.497 million. Why? This $4 million guaranteed salary. If the Vikings end up trading Hargrave, it ends up moving the guaranteed money to the new team. And that in itself is a really big deal here. If they were able to facilitate a trade, which the Vikings would love to be able to do, facilitating a trade would be great. Problem is, you have to find somebody willing to take on the $14.2 million base salary, $750,000 roster bonuses, and $50,000 in workout bonuses. That's a cap hit of $15 million, and you're guaranteeing $4 of that. What might end up happening is Hargrave gets traded, and because he gets traded, then once that happens, hey, we're going to cut your salary down to $10 million, but we're going to guarantee all of it. And that way, Hargrave knows he's getting a bunch of money, and the team is able to save $5 million in cap space. That would likely be the conversation that we're looking at in terms of a Javon Hargrave trade, if they were able to make one happen. Now, what's the cost of a Javon Hargrave trade? We'll find out. I think there's two different schools of thought. One, if there really aren't a lot of teams interested, if there's like one, maybe two, you're probably looking at a 7th round pick or a 6-7 swap because of what that contract is. But this is a weaker defensive tackle class in free agency. And quite frankly, after the first 3 defensive tackles, it's not a ton of depth in the draft either. So a guy like Javon Hargrave, even going into his age 33 season, he has pass rush juice left in the tank. It's the run defense on standard downs where he struggles. You're going to have to use him in slants and get him to penetrate gaps upfield, which is what the Vikings started to do towards the back end of the season because they didn't have a nose tackle. Hargrave can still give you really plus production, especially a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, who are desperate to get any kind of juice out of their interior, they might be willing to give you upwards of a fourth because of some of those things that I talked about. The tough part about identifying trades is there's so many different factors that play into what a player costs. I'll never forget Antonio Brown coming off of one of his better seasons in 2018, went for a third and a fifth because he was just a head case. And the Steelers were just done with him. But based on talent, Antonio Brown should have gone for like a first plus. He should have gone for close to the Tyreek Hill deal. We think of Antonio Brown now as just this eccentric character who did all of these crazy things and has kind of gone off the deep end a little bit. But the reality with Antonio Brown is on the field, he might have been the best receiver from 2010 to 2019. Literally. He's a Hall of Fame level wide receiver. So the fact that he didn't go for more is because of those extenuating circumstances. We've also seen players go for way more because of demand. Remember Mohamed Sanu at the trade deadline? The Patriots paid a second round pick to the Falcons for him, and then Sanu did nothing. Yeah, that's a supply and demand thing. Chase Claypool went for a second. You just never know how players will end up going because those players end up going for higher or lower depending on what the market tells you. And Hargrave, I think, could be one of those cases. And that will also play into the fact of an Anthony Richardson trade. Strap in. This is going to be a really interesting one to parse out because Richardson has been given permission to seek a trade. He's interested in the Vikings. The Vikings are interested in him per multiple reports. And look, Richardson is kind of the same quarterback as J.J. McCarthy. Now, they're not identical in every facet, but they do share a lot of similarities. They struggle with accuracy. They struggle with ball placement. They're consistently injured, and they don't have a ton of reps. Richardson has thrown less passes since graduating high school than Bo Nix threw in 2025. That's part of the problem with quarterback development right now is guys, and hopefully NIL is going to fix this because they need more experience coming in to the NFL. You're not always going to get that. Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson, there are two examples. I know going top 4 is great money, but you want to set yourself up for success in the league. Maybe spend 2 more years in school and get a lot of reps before leaving. Trey Lance would have been better off transferring out of North Dakota State for that 2020 COVID season, but he didn't want to do that because he had a lot of loyalty to the program. And unfortunately, coming out when he did ended up kind of screwing him over. And now he's just going to be a journeyman backup. And hopefully somebody takes a chance on him. That would be the hope, right? Richardson is on his last leg. 3 years with the Colts. He was anointed the starter right away, played 4 games, then had a shoulder injury, got hurt. Then in 2024, he was so up and down, and he got benched for a time, and that was where we got that Kevin O'Connell quote with Anthony Richardson in midfield, which is one of the reasons why the two pairs are continuously linked. Remember, the Vikings reportedly offered 3 firsts and 2 seconds to the Arizona Cardinals to move up to 3rd overall because they wanted to take Anthony Richardson. I think O'Connell sees Richardson as his unicorn, as this is the guy I can take, mold, make good enough, and really dominate with my offense. Now, is that going to be a thing? Yeah. The idea of Richardson, we're talking Hall of Fame football player. The idea of a finished Richardson product. Hall of Famer. This is a Josh Allen skill set in a 6'5", 240 or 50 pound frame. You've got a cannon arm. Some guys have strong arms, but they need their base underneath them, which is where J.J. McCarthy is. He's not going to be the kind of guy to roll out and fire an absolute whip without having any kind of base. John Elway could do that. Dan Marino could do that. Matt Stafford can do that. Aaron Rodgers can do that. McCarthy loses arm strength when he does not have that base underneath him. And that's okay. You don't need to have this absolute cannon of an arm in order to succeed in the NFL. Most of what makes you successful is in between the ears. And if you can do that, then you maximize what your talents are. Richardson still needs work. He needs mechanical work. And we know J.J. McCarthy does too. He did spend a lot of time with the same coach that helped Josh Allen. So much of it was with the hips in the lower half where they weren't syncing up with his upper half. But when it did, it looked great. He can throw the deep ball really well. And when he's on schedule and on time and in rhythm, he's awesome. But the problem is you don't get that consistently. If O'Connell can unlock that consistently, oh my gosh, we are talking about this offense going to a whole new level. And I think that that would be an incredible, incredible thing. Now, should they make the move? I think your mileage is going to vary on that because what the Minnesota Vikings do here is going to be very, very interesting. I just don't know how they're going to end up playing this. I don't know how they're going to attack. I think there's a lot of different things that they can possibly do. What would the price be? Well, if you go to azsports.com, which I highly recommend you do, I write and cover the Minnesota Vikings on a full-time basis. We did, as a staff, talk about what an Anthony Richardson train could look like. The Vikings are going to be awarded the 97th overall pick. I firmly believe that the Vikings would offer 97 and then get 113 back. And then I think they could throw in a 5th round pick as well. That would, if they did that, that would equate to about pick 128. So a late 4th. That's not exactly terrible value. You may think it's too much, and that is completely fine because what we've seen from Richardson has not been great. But Trey Lance went for a 4th, and I think Richardson going for a 4th also makes a lot of sense. But you have to get a little creative. 97 is a comp pick in the 3rd round. So that's basically a 4th round pick. Plus, you're getting a 4th in return. So you're dropping 16 slots from the 3rd to the 4th round and then giving up a 5th. That's fine value. And you know what? If he hits it, great. Or it could be a situation where iron sharpens iron. And all of a sudden, that's what gets JJ McCarthy to succeed and become the guy. We don't really know how things are going to elevate. We don't know how things are actually going to develop with the Vikings from a quarterback perspective. What we do know is that they desperately need to find the guy. And taking chances at finding the guy is probably what they should try and do. Sam Darnold was the guy. We know that now. And some of us talked about how we kind of knew it from the get-go. I believed that he could be the guy, even with those 2 losses. I still decided at the end of the day, hey, you know what? Roll with the young guy. See what happens. But there's a real chance that you have buyer's remorse. And they did. The Vikings did, because if they had Sam Darnold, they could realistically have been in the Super Bowl. Now, you bring in Richardson, you have 2 bites at the apple. 2 opportunities to have a high upside quarterback develop, become your franchise guy. You'd just like one of them to just automatically be it, but that's not the situation they're in. I'd much rather do that than sign a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who quite frankly was bad last year. We'll see what the Vikings do. But this Richardson thing, it's not going away. The other interesting rumor, Derek Carr wants to come play for Super Bowl contender. He said he'd come out of retirement for that on his podcast with his brother David. Vikings keep being talked about. Carr's not a sexy name, but he would provide a level of stability at that position. And quite frankly, somebody who could just operate an offense would be a welcome change. I don't know what the Vikings will end up doing. I ranked the top 10 options at quarterback for the Vikings to add. Richardson was 1 because of the fascination. Then Geno Smith at 2, Kirk Cousins at 3, Malik Willis at 4, and he was only that low because of the cost. You might have to give him an average of $30 million a year to bring him in. And then lastly, Derek Carr at 5. Kyler Murray at 6, Tua Tagovailoa at 7, Mac Jones at 8. And if you guys pay attention on here and you liked and subscribed already, thank you too. You should. You know how much I don't like the idea of a Mac Jones trade. Nobody's going to gaslight me into thinking he's the next Sam Darnold. Doesn't have the actual talent and ability. 9 is Aaron Rodgers, and 10 is Marcus Mariota, who would just be a Carson Wentz type, but a better version of that. A stable backup quarterback. So there you have it. We're going to be talking about rumors. We're going to be talking about the combine. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things. You're going to want to follow along here with A to Z Sports Live here on YouTube and also on Facebook. We appreciate all of you. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell for those notifications, and follow my written work, atozsports.com/Minnesota Vikings news. You won't regret it. I'm Tyler Fornes. Thank you so much for watching. Skull Vikings.